Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're taking a virtual trip to the spectacular UNESCO World Heritage Site of Mamallapuram. It's down in Tamil Nadu in the south of India, just a stone's throw from Chennai. And it's a place absolutely famous for these incredible monuments, mostly carved out by the mighty Pallava kings way back in the 7th and 8th centuries. But today, we aren't looking at a carved temple or some human-made statue. No, we're investigating a monument that the Pallavas probably had absolutely nothing to do with. We're looking at a rock. But not just any rock. We're talking about a massive, towering boulder that literally completely defies the laws of physics as we understand them. It's a rock that simply refuses to roll. 1,200. I really want you to let that sink in for a second. This colossal boulder has been standing right here, completely undisturbed for over 1,200 years at the very least. And the crazy thing is, it's not sitting in some flat, comfortable valley. It's perched on this remarkably small, incredibly slippery-looking base on a very steep incline. If you just look at it, your brain immediately tells you, okay, gravity should pull that down. That steep slope should really push it right over the edge. Yet miraculously, it balances itself perfectly, standing proud against the horizon century after century. So the absolute crucial question we have to ask is simply, why doesn't it roll? How does a boulder of this incredible size stay so proudly balanced on a steep hill instead of just crashing down the slope? Well, when we see something that totally breaks our understanding of how the physical world works, human beings naturally try to fill in the blanks. And when you have a mind-boggling wonder like this sitting in India, which is already a land filled with magnificent wonders, the stories that spring up to explain them are often even more fantastic than the objects themselves. So let's look at Section 1, Myths of Sky Gods, Extraterrestrials and Divine Butter. For generations, the locals haven't just called this thing a boulder. The local name for this rock is actually Von Irai Kal, and literally translated, that means the stone of the sky gods. It's a really beautiful, evocative name, isn't it? But it naturally makes you wonder, who exactly were these mysterious sky gods? Because depending on who you ask in the region, the answer takes you on two completely different, totally wild journeys. On one hand, we have this fantastic story suggesting that the sky gods were actually a bunch of extraterrestrial aliens. Maybe travelers from a galaxy far, far away who came to Earth and just placed this colossal rock right on the slope. Why? Well, simply because they could. I mean, who really knows what advanced ancient aliens would need a perfectly balanced boulder for, right? But then, on the other hand, we have a story rooted deeply in local theology. The second fantastic local story claims that this massive rock is actually a piece of hardened butter. Yep, you heard me correctly, butter. The story goes that Lord Krishna, as a young child, absolutely loved stealing dollops of butter and eating it on the sly. According to legend, one extremely large handful of this stolen butter slipped from the young sky god's grasp, fell right onto this hillside in Mamallapuram, and hardened into this very rock. In fact, this story is so deeply woven into the local culture that even today, the boulder is universally known to everyone as Krishna's butterball. Moving on to Section 2, the geological explanation, the real physics at play. Of course, if you go and ask a scientist, you're going to get a very different story. Geologists, as you might expect, kind of laugh at these supernatural and extraterrestrial stories. To them, it's not hard and divine butter, and it's certainly not some ancient alien art project. They classify Krishna's butterball strictly as a natural phenomenon. But hey, just because it's natural doesn't mean it isn't an absolute masterpiece of physics. And this brilliantly illustrates the actual mechanics holding this massive weight in place. Let's break down the hard science from our sources. It essentially comes down to this perfectly orchestrated dance between friction and gravity. First off, we have the immense friction between the rock and the actual rock bed it sits on. Second, despite its massive bulbous top, the boulder actually rests on a remarkably small 4-foot base. And finally, the ultimate secret here is its center of gravity. The weight of the rock is distributed in such a precise, exact way over that tiny 4-foot base that it creates a perfect state of equilibrium. It literally looks like it's about to tip over at any second. But gravitationally speaking, it is locked solid into that hillside. Which brings us to Section 3, Unmoved by Kings and Elephants, Historical Attempts to Budge the Boulder. But, physics on paper is one thing. Testing it in reality is a whole other ballgame. What's absolutely fascinating is how human history has actually interacted with this geological marvel. As I mentioned earlier, Mamallapuram is totally filled with monuments carved by the prolific Pallava sculptors back in the 7th and 8th centuries. These artisans left their mark on almost every single rock around the area. They carved intricate temples, massive elephants, and detailed mythological scenes directly into the hillside. Yet, they left this huge boulder completely untouched. And surely there's no way they could have just missed it. This mystery leads us to some incredible real-world historical tests of its balance, because human history has actively tried to mess with this thing. Way back in the 7th century, the great Pallava king Narasimhavarman I decided he wanted it moved. He threw all his royal might at it and he completely failed. The rock didn't even budge. Fast forward over 1,000 years to 1908. A British governor, perhaps thinking modern ingenuity could somehow outsmart ancient rock, decided to try the exact same thing. But he didn't just use human manpower, he brought in elephant power. He actually hooked up massive elephants to the boulder and tried to drag it down the slippery incline. And what happened? No way. He failed too. And that brings us to today. Over a century after the elephants gave up and over 1,200 years after its earliest recorded history, the butterball is still standing perfectly balanced in the exact same location, serving as a fantastic and entirely mind-bending photo opportunity for travelers from all over the world. I actually want to focus on the aftermath of that first failed attempt for a second. When the 7th century Pallava king Narasimhavarman I failed to move it, he didn't try to chip away at it or destroy it out of frustration. He just accepted his defeat. He concluded that the rock's immovable nature was simply, quote, God's will. As a result, he explicitly ordered that the stone be left completely untouched by his sculptors. And this singular moment of historic failure beautifully ties back to the mythology we were talking about earlier. It is this amazing moment where human ego just bowed down to the awe-inspiring power of a natural phenomenon, allowing the mystery of the stone of the sky gods to endure for well over a millennium. And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. We've looked at ancient kings, totally frustrated British governors, alien theories, hardened divine butter, and the sheer unyielding power of friction and gravity. Krishna's butterball is just a magnificent reminder that sometimes the absolute most thrilling things on Earth are the ones that simply sit still and completely refuse to play by the rules. It leaves us with a really provocative question. What other seemingly impossible wonders are out there, hiding in plain sight, just waiting for us to uncover their incredible blend of science, history, and myth? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the impossible.